Hello, everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our webinar. It's great to have you with us. I can see people are coming in, so I'm just going to take a moment or two. I'm Justin Trenner. I'm one of the directors of QA Financial, and we're delighted to be hosting today's webinar. We are very pleased to see so many people joining us. Just to say that you can post questions via the screen towards the right-hand side. You'll see there's a Q&A area, and you can post questions, and I will share them with our panelists as we go through. I'm Justin Trenner. As I say, I'm director of the business. I'm responsible for our research and for our quality benchmark analytics. If you do find you have any problems as you're watching this webinar, you will find there's a link somewhere around your screen where you can join via Zoom directly, but you will have more functionality if you can stay in the portal that you've joined through. First of all, let me thank our sponsors, Ava Automation. We'll be hearing from their CEO, Vidar Amin, shortly, but I'm delighted to be hosting Tom Kotwitz, who is the AVP for CNA Financial, and he's been responsible for re-engineering how the firm has accelerated quality and software delivery. You'll be aware that all financial institutions are presently involved in major digital transformations, and that process has been accelerated and given a hardened edge by the demands of always-on availability and remote access that we've seen through the pandemic. Our experience is that very often software quality suffers and is an afterthought of digital transformation, and that fixing bugs after the fact becomes as big a job as any ongoing new development. In some cases that we're aware of and that we've benchmarked, more than half of resourcing goes to fixing what's already out there rather than developing new stuff. So this is a little bit the very present background and the context in which I'm delighted to invite Tom to join us. Tom joined CNA Insurance in 2019 with a mandate to review and revise how CNA Financial delivered quality and increased automation in testing. So Tom, perhaps the first question I'd like to throw at you is, tell me a bit more about your background and what led you down the path towards CNA.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin, for having me today. Joined CNA back in 2019. My background is in software delivery. Found myself in the testing domain about 10 years back, and have really enjoyed that. But my background was building out highly distributed test automation, supporting test engineering from really in the not so much in the financial domain, but in the e-commerce area. So when I came to CNA back a couple of years ago, kind of was presented with as I call it, kind of a blank canvas kind of opportunity to kind of build out a new area, build out a new team, and so it's been an exciting couple of years.
So let's move to the world of CNA. When you got to CNA, what did you find there?
It was I mean, we always go back in this. There's always the terms of centralized testing, decentralized. When it comes to test automation, what you want to do is I'm a strong believer in that centralization effort, right? When it comes to tooling and process, et cetera, just because you don't need to have all your teams out there trying to figure out how to do automation, right? And so everyone does it a little differently. They all kind of do it from a kind of a localized perspective, and we live in a heterogeneous world, right? Where we have mainframe and mobile and web, and so it all has to fit together, and you need some common solutions. So it was we have multiple partners, development partners. Testing was heavily embedded within those organizations. So they were kind of using more localized tools and proprietary tools. We had some, some software here, some licensed software as well that was used in some areas. Some areas chose to do their own thing. So it was a very disparate kind of situation where I kind of came in and it's like, okay, first of all, let's just assess where, what we have and where, understand if there's anything there that we can leverage. And it really came quickly within the first few months of what we have in place today is not going to work for us in the future. And I'm not just talking about the automation, but just the process and tooling, et cetera, that kind of goes into test engineering. So it was a very fragmented environment.
Is it fair to say that there was business leadership awareness that fragmented QA processes led to fragmented performance of development teams? Did business...
Yeah. I mean, when I came in, it was already it was already recognized that we have a kind of a disjointed kind of a testing organization structure. I mean, it was working for us, but it at the time, but they also knew that it wasn't going to support us in the future the way we needed, right? Because before I came in, I mean, there was a decision made. We are going heavy down the product-centric kind of structure. We are expanding. We are doing some agile. We're going to expand heavily into the agile world. Continuous integration. Integrate with DevOps. So they knew that the bar was being raised ahead of them. So I think that's where they said, okay, we need to kind of bring in the expertise, bring in the capabilities, form a small centralized organization, identify a vendor that can come in and kind of help kind of partner and drive with this. SLK was the vendor that was chosen. It was chosen before I joined, right? You want to come into these situations wanting to kind of be a part of that process, but they were heavily vetted across about 12 other vendors. They wanted that right mix of kind of test acumen, automation focus, and so we brought in SLK. SLK leverages AVO, and so we kind of started going down that path.
So at a very high level, and we're going to go into this in a bit more detail in a moment, but what would you say were the key goals of changing how quality was executed?
Yeah, so big focus is around just more about the consistency of process, common tooling. We want to build out an ecosystem that is enterprise-wide, right? So we're not having people spending time trying to keep automation updated, refreshed, et cetera. Building out, being able to have that collaboration, creating that collaboration, transparency, better metrics, right? Because we weren't really capturing metrics from a testing perspective consistently. And then we also, again, we're in the insurance domain. There's also compliance things, compliance areas that we just need to make sure we address and we're rock solid on as well.
So you went from a very heterogeneous approach to testing to a specific target, and I'm showing a slide now that has the 4 key goals that you've just described, but an empowering process so that the local teams still have the power to run their projects and their programs, right, but with a consistency of coordinated testing. You mentioned measurement and you mentioned ensuring compliance. Was there resistance at first to imposing a central control, or were people relieved to have some kind of guidance? It would be a very unusual organization if the answer is B, but I'm hoping it was B.
Yeah, no, it was not a yes. We're all on board here. It was really about taking the time to prove ourselves, right? We started small, right? We embedded ourselves in some new projects, got engaged, we made the decision very early on. We're not going to go into this like a big bang, shift everything around, introduce all new tooling and process and bring in all new resources. So we knew going in that this was going to be a bit of a journey for us, right? And so we kind of went off on two fronts. One was, let's slowly build out the testing capabilities. I would say that the testing services, right? So we are bringing in new test resources where you've got people that have been testing these applications for a long time, right? But we're trying to shift skill set. We're trying to shift process and some of the standards and the capabilities, and bringing in that automation mindset. And we had pockets of that, of course, right? But again, it wasn't consistent. So we slowly, we knew that there's a lot of development work going on, and we have all these roadmaps, and so number one, we knew we can't derail the work that's going on. We have to inject ourselves slowly, very tactical kind of injection. Then we also went down the other side of, let's build out our horizontals, our shared services, and build out these common capabilities, which again, were very fragmented. Performance testing, dynamic security testing, test data services evolving into test data management was not really a big focus. Our test environments, right? Stability of our test environments. These are all things that we knew we had to take on, right, to support our longer term journey. So we were slowly building out our horizontals, slowly injecting across into the testing services, and it was really a kind of a balancing act, right, as we went forward. Constantly checking, are we getting the right feedback? Are our teams engaging? Are we having knowledge transfer, concerns, etc. So it was it took us about a year and a half or so, really, to kind of get to that full shift. But I think looking back, I think that was definitely the right move.
You've described a process where you start small, you create some wins that people can see and they can get behind. But by definition, you were anointing some existing practice and some new practices as good and displacing some other practices. So I'm guessing that you found some people concerned about their fiefdoms, concerned about giving buy-in and resistant. How did you overcome those challenges?
You know what? You're not going to win those out of the gate. And I've done this before. This is the second kind of transformation I've gone through. And, it's really building up those partnerships, right? And just forging yourselves. You get people to understand you're there to help, right? That you can bring in, you can bring in the extra expertise, a different focus, right? And it's allow people to come in with this testing acumen, which is some people, there's test-driven development. There's always going to be those kind of on those extreme sides of where especially startups want to be able to do. But when you get into legacy environments, you cannot can overstate the skills that experienced testers bring to the game, right? And understanding the integrations, the environment, the data. They're not just focused on an application. They have to have broad knowledge across the whole enterprise, how this all feeds together. So yeah, it was, again, very resistance, I'll say, some at the beginning, but as we got about 6 months in, 9 months in, it very quickly started to turn into collaboration and partnership. So but yeah, the worst thing you can do is just kind of go in and say, okay, we're just going to start changing the world around us, and catch up with us if you can. It's really got to be in partnership, and you got to be in lockstep with your development partners, etc.
So part of that's clearly going to be rationalizing the vendors, choosing the vendors, and I know that you had a very open source oriented background. So what was your approach to rationalizing vendors and to deciding what to go open source, what to go vendor led? What What were your criteria?
Well, the main criteria is really about, when I look at a solution, three main things come to mind. Is going to be number one is, the stability of the testing, right? It's got to be stable. It's got to be it's got to be distributed. You cannot single thread your testing, right? If you want to work and support continuous testing, support agile. So it has to have that ability to do highly distributed testing, test a lot quickly. And I think one thing where I've seen a lot of automation initiatives fail is they don't put enough focus on, thinking the long term, right? Eventually you're going to build out all this automation, but then you have to maintain it, right? And that maintainability is really crucial, and that's where many organizations and some of where I've gone in, where I've a couple of times now we've kind of come in and kind of automation has failed. We've kind of come in with a different approach, and but having that that focus on building maintainable test automation is very modularized. It's you're repurposing as much of your navigational flows as you can, et cetera. These are the things that really make things, it allows you to do that N-1 in-sprint testing in the future, but also it eliminates that overhead that sometimes entails, right? When you start to build out thousands of test cases, right? It just starts to deteriorate over time. I guess the last thing I'll also say to a skill set, the ease, my background in open source, again, more Java based, right? And the shift of the industry is starting to go to codeless, right? And to be able to make this more, you can start to bridge that gap and start to leverage, get people working on test automation that have maybe, that don't necessarily have that strong Java background, but they really are good. They're strong testing SMEs. They understand the process, and getting tools in their hands actually, brings a lot of benefits as well.
So we've had a question in from Prem Tito, who raises a question which absolutely fits with what you're talking about here, because he wants to know, did you actually do anything specific to help developers and testers get experience of the platforms that you were putting in place?
So when I came to CNA, I guess there was, again, some of this, the ground floor was kind of set, and where, what I needed to do was, I was pretty much given a mandate. We've got to get, we got basically 12 months. We got to get to a point where we can very quickly expand out our test automation, be able to support, kind of this product-centric kind of development structure that we're moving towards. And so when it came to skill sets, I really had to do a quick assessment. So again, if I go open source, right, I can, I'm looking at probably having to bring in a lot of new skill sets, new resources that we did not have in place at the time. Our vendor SLK at the time had a lot of training, and we're talking about AVO here, had a lot of training on AVO already. And actually, the training actually is, it's very, it's very simple training on the platform itself. So, we had to leverage, we were able to leverage existing resources that had training on our eventual solution, AVO, but also when we brought in new people, we also had, the training was there to quickly get people onboarded and being productive on the platform. So it wasn't really again, we worked with, in my, here at CNA, we leverage, vendors for a lot of our development. Same with testing. So it wasn't so much I had to build this within the organization. It was more about leveraging what was available to us, within our vendors.
So you previously mentioned one of the key benefits of going vendor-led rather than open source is that you can get to market quickly with that external support rather than doing a great deal of gluing together and customizing. Does the same concept apply to any training and guidance needed either for development vendors or internal colleagues? That by working with vendor-led testing tools, they could take on that training burden.
Yeah, I mean, so the great thing is, well, as we build out, back to our horizontals, building out the capabilities, you also want to build out a strong test automation center of excellence, right? Practice, right? And so, again, back to the benefits of the centralization, having one common enterprise solution, right? Is then you have that core element available that either can support the training, right? We can leverage the training that's part of the solution itself. And we can also embed experts within teams, right? To then do training, kind of real-time training. So we kind of developed that, we had all those different capabilities kind of, built up early on, so that as we did this expansion, as we built, expanded our testing engagement across other areas, we took on new projects, we had that core foundation of expertise. And then just, again, I would say the mature training that kind of went along with the solution.
That makes sense. Thank you. So now we get to sort of the point where you're selecting vendors. What were the key differentiating criteria when you were thinking about different vendors that you could use for different parts of the process?
Yeah. So there, I mean, there's, we all know there's these, the big, there's the big vendors out there that, I'll say are sometimes the safe bet, right?
Right.
It's just, again, you're not going to get criticized for taking on, the big names and bring them in it, but you're also bringing in some big dollars, right? And there's a heavy investment that goes with that.
I think we just lost your camera. There we go. We got you back.
There we go. Sorry. So we had, so when I was looking at, when I look at vendors, again, whether it's test automation or any of our other, software that that we kind of bring into the ecosystem, I'm looking for the ability to have a vendor that's going to work with us, right? There's a lot of, we're going, there's a lot of different legacy platforms that we have to deal with, right? There's, security constraints, right? That sometimes get difficult or custom to each organization, right? That, sometimes tools do not play well, and based on the types of security software structures that are in place. And so I wanted someone that, that I'm not just again, I'm just not one of the consumers of the product, and I'm there waiting for functionality and features to come in. Or if I do have issues, I'm just going into a help desk somewhere, and we spend the next 6 weeks trying to solve the problem, right? What I found, so when I'm looking for a vendor, really, I'm looking for that collaboration, a vendor that's going to collaborate and partner with us. In my previous organization, I was essentially, in my testing organization, I played that kind of that product ownership, of the platform, building out the open source solution. I had a team surrounded, I was surrounded by a really talented team that was able to develop and expand our automation capabilities in the solution. When you go with go down the software approach, right? I want to still have an extended team that is going to work with me and partner with me and hear me, right? I want to see my stuff in the pipeline. I want to see, show me your roadmap, and you've heard us. Here's the three things that are important to us as a priority. I want to be able to pick up the phone, right, and just talk to the product managers, the CTO. I mean, these are the things that are kind of important to me. And that's just a little bit of, the open source allows you to do that, right? You have full control. But I found that I'm looking for a vendor that's going to give me that kind of that middle ground where I feel like they're an extended team versus just a vendor we license with.
So from my experience as being in another life, being a vendor, I I think that it's always great to work with a firm who can be a development partner, who can
Yeah.
help you customize the product around real needs. I think one of the challenges for some of the larger firms, some of the larger vendor firms, is they do their once or twice yearly product releases, and you just have to hope that it fits your need.
Yeah.
And I guess you found with Avo that there was a little bit more guarantee that it was fulfilling your needs and covering for the gaps.
Yeah. No, and it's and they understand when we have when our needs are there are critical, right? That's there's always going to be things you want, right? There's always going to be those little tweaks, those little things like, hey, we'd like to put it in, we'll put a ticket in, we'd like to see this enhancement. And there's always some of that, right? But when we're looking at where our roadmap is, because because I'm accountable to my roadmap, right, of where we want to be in the future, right, and where we see that there are some gaps or some hurdles or challenges, I'm looking for that vendor that's going to be right there at my side to prioritize, understand where I'm coming from. I'm not just one of 1,000, right? And they'll go in and say, "Yep, here's our roadmap, but you know what? We hear you. Let's shift our priorities around, and we'll get that to you, in that next release, right? Rather than 4 releases down."
So let's relate to where you are on your journey. You've gone from very limited automation in 2019 from what you've told me offline, some 80% of the way to where you want to be. Not all the way there, but very substantially. The screen shot represents that you've got fully automated processes. You've got processes that rely on some manual orchestration, but automated routines. And inevitably, there will always be an element of manual testing. So that's sort of, let's say, the line in the ground for where you are now. I guess I've got 2 questions that are the 2 sides of the same coin. What have you learned from what you did that you think you can pat yourself on the back? We did that well. That worked. That's a good lesson to share. And what have you done that you would, let's say, you do differently next time around in another life?
I think we've made some of the right decisions early on. Again, we did early investment in test automation. We're bringing in some of these, we've kind of established the right, some of the right, the tooling and the practices, where I think where we could have done we probably should have shifted our focus a little earlier than we did. Probably as we build out automation, as we're engaging in testing, we probably need to shift a little bit and look at the stability. Number one, the stability of our test environments, right, that we're operating within, and maybe make that more of a little bit of an earlier priority to kind of work with our development and infrastructure teams to kind of get to work on some of the stability issues, because as you build out all this automation, right, automation is a little more finicky than a person on a keyboard, right? And so when you have some unstable environments, right, it makes the test automation a little bit more difficult, right? To keep it stable and to develop it out. So I think we probably could have shifted a little bit earlier focus on working with our partners to kind of, hey, let's solve some of these stability issues. That's the one thing that comes to mind. Test data is always, test data I think is always kind of, probably just never gets enough focus, how important test data is to drive this continuous testing, especially when you start to get into the heterogeneous testing, where you want to have common data that's shared across multiple platforms. And so you can have that for those end-to-end solutions. So while we're going down the path, and our goal next year is to go into test data management and kind of go into that bigger space. We started out small with test, kind of like a test data services. Let's inject, let's learn, let's get people there, embedded into the teams and supporting it as a shared service organization. how do we kind of expedite and streamline the generation of test data? But I would have been good, I think, to go back a little bit. It's like, let's talk about the test data management side. I think is ultimately what's going to really solve some of these issues. Probably bringing that in earlier probably would have been better. And there's a lot of cost involved. You have to kind of prove the need and all that. But I think if I had my druthers, I would have rather kind of started TDM maybe a year ago, kind of take us down that path.
So I think you've answered my final question, which is where next, because I guess you're saying that more of the same for the process overall that you've been following, but test data, I guess, is next on your radar. So I'm going to thank you very much. I'm going to tell our audience that I can see we've got more questions coming in. We're going to hear momentarily from Vidar Armin of Avo Automation. And then the three of us are going to come together to answer the questions that I can see are coming in on my system. So thanks very much, Tom, and we'll see you again in a couple of moments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And so with that, let me introduce to the screen Vidar Armin. Vidar Armin is the CEO of Avo Automation. Let me just share the presentation deck. So over to you, Vidar.
Thank you, Justin. And so first off, I want to say thank you to all of you who have joined us on this webinar. Big thanks to Tom for all the support that you and the rest of the CNA team have given us as we've embarked on this journey with you guys, as you've embraced Agile and really started to move into this product-centric model. So what I thought we will do, Justin, just for 5-7 minutes very quickly is kind of show you a little bit or talk a little bit about, what Avo is doing and how we're solving some of the challenges in the test automation marketplace. And, we'll end then with a little bit about, who finally Avo is. Next. Thank you. So with Avo, right, we're a test automation focused vendor, functional test automation. We also do API automation, and we also now are enabling accessibility testing with a simple click for the rest of our functionality. But what we've noticed is many organizations, as they embrace Agile, testing is often one of the slowest parts of the delivery lifecycle, and they can't really successfully deliver on their Agile goals unless they truly embrace automation, right? So when we looked at building out our solutions for the marketplace, we wanted to make sure it was something that would work in an Agile environment, and it was highly easy to build test cases relatively rapidly. You heard Tom speak a little bit earlier about, the ease of use, and sometimes when you go down a code-based automation solution, you require that level of team members who often you don't have in certain organizations. So we wanted to make sure that our product is a no-code product that can deliver in-sprint automation and is highly scalable as clients move more and more into the Agile world, right? The other thing that we're very focused on is ensuring we deliver on the total cost of ownership at a rate which is much better than most other organizations in the world or most other vendors in the world. While many organizations look at pure license costs, we like to challenge that thought a little bit and ask them to look at your total cost of ownership when you go down either a proprietary solution or even an open source solution, right? So because we're no code, we enable a lot of the existing manual team members to go ahead and leverage our solution and build out functional test automation very, very quickly. And in doing so, because we've made everything no code and highly visual, we've also infused a lot of reusability into our product. So once you build a certain amount of modularity around functional test cases, you can reuse a lot of those components in other aspects of your business as you want to go ahead and build quality into those particular applications as well, right? And finally, we're also making sure that the maintainability is much, much, much easier in the long run through effective traceability and relatively minimal intervention as you go ahead and change your applications, and then obviously a small amount of work needs to go in to keep those test cases up to speed and current, right? Finally, one thing I'll just also mention is we're also very focused on really delivering on in-sprint automation. So, like Tom mentioned, many organizations are starting with N-1 or N-2, and that's absolutely, great that businesses start there. But we want to keep pushing the boundaries here and really see how we can deliver on in-sprint automation. And we're doing this through the ability to actually build test automation, often without the UI being in place during that short 2-week sprint cycle. And then as the UI comes live, we're now enabling the ability to quickly map the UI with the test case that's been built in that same sprint, right? So in summary, I think we're really focused on delivering continuous testing for the market as we embrace Agile. And we want to make sure we do it, with the current team that you have in place. We really don't need highly technical resources to go and build a lot of automation at scale. And very quickly, talking about the product, next slide, please. This is just a summary. We'd be happy to show the product in a customized demo to anyone that's interested. But we focus, like I said, we take a no-code approach to test automation, and we support 200 different technologies. I think this is an important point. When CNA was looking at a solution that could be highly scalable across their enterprise, large insurance company in the US, technology that started, 1970s or 80s, some systems that we're working on today are 1985, like Guidewire. But when you look at this, you need to have a solution which is very, very easy to use, but also cuts across different technologies. So we work with Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, mobile applications, desktop applications, mainframe applications, you name it, we can pretty much cover it. And a lot of the speed that we're focusing on, while we take a no-code approach, we're also integrating the ability to actually map business processes and then auto-generate test cases, leveraging some of our AI capabilities. This was another capability that was used quite often at CNA in the early stages to quickly ramp up on the automation on the regression automation for some of their critical business applications. And I'll finally move to the last slide, which just gives you a quick glimpse of, who Avo is. So we are a company that's focused primarily on enterprise clients. We work with multiple Fortune 500 companies in the financial services sector, also in the manufacturing sector, and now one of our recent wins was actually in the entertainment industry with movies. But we're focused on end-to-end automation, right? Because we cover so many technologies. We want to make sure that we do this in a way which is highly secure, considering we work in a pretty regulated industry, financial services. And I think, being a young brand, we've made a lot of traction bringing on some major customers. I think our clients really trust us, and we've got to a stage where, we're scaling at an enterprise level with them. And similarly, multiple other technology vendors are working with us as well. SAP and Oracle both have certified our solutions, and we're testing partners to them, especially when we're looking at cloud migrations, whether it's organizations moving from SAP ECC to S/4HANA, or similarly, Oracle's client base moving from EBS to the new Oracle Cloud infrastructure as well. So quick overview about Avo, Justin. Happy to answer any additional questions.
So if we can bring Tom back as well, we are going to just answer a few questions that have come in from our audience. So thank you so much for that overview, Vida. And I'll make our pictures a bit larger. We just have 4 or 5 minutes to address some questions. So the first question I have, Prem, I took the liberty of looking you up, and I think you're with Allstate. You do more or less the same, as far as I can tell, as Tom does, but at Allstate. So Prem asks, how have you, follows on your data question, and it's a question really for Tom, how you've managed with synthetic data needs. Have you, in fact, what has been your strategy around data? Has it been to create synthetic data? Has it been to mask data? What has been your data strategy so far?
Yeah, and actually that's what we're initiating, as we speak. Our test, from test data side, it's been really more about that, about just kind of building out some of that, the test data repository out there so that, the automation can leverage it. We are right now undertaking a evaluation to go down that path, for a really more a robust test data management solution. It's going to have the data masking, synthetic data. So we're literally going through and having discussions now with the idea that we bring this on board next year. It's going to be a journey, right? This is not something we're going to be able to roll out really quickly, but I think we've now got enough focus, and the business cases there. We need to bring it in for next year.
That's great. A follow-on question from that, and I will admit this is taking me beyond my knowledge base, so I'm hoping the two of you can answer this, because I think it could go to either of you. Whether you've looked at hyperintelligence automation.
I have not. I will admit. I think where we're, I think what as we go into the coming years, even next year, I want to look at some, how do we bring in intelligence, better intelligence into the platform, into our solutions. There's a lot of complex, my background, e-commerce, fairly simple model, I will say. Now that we've gone, I'd say in the financial insurance industry, there's a lot more complex business rules there in play that you have to account for. So I do believe that that's something that we need to start to focus on. Right now, I'm focusing on just building that ground floor. I know, down the road we're going to be looking at other opportunities.
And so interesting question. I think I'll take this in two parts, right? So from the Evo standpoint, we are working on a functionality called Insights, right? Which allows much more detailed levels of understanding kind of what's going on from a reporting or a dashboard standpoint, and actually giving predictive solutions or practices. That's something that we're working on from our roadmap standpoint. And then there's something else which we put into what we call our project X's. It's essentially these big ticket items where we can start to use NLP to look at requirements and actually figure out if we can start to self-create test cases through those requirements. A little bit of a moonshot. Don't want to talk too much about it right now, but yeah, we absolutely, from the Evo standpoint, continue to focus on innovation and try and see if we can deliver on some of these pretty wild ideas.
And a question more specifically for you, Vida, that's come in from Devmalia, which is, could you elaborate a bit more on in-sprint testing and specifically how it relates to holistic regression suite? Yeah,
sure. So when we talk in-sprint testing, and so Devmalia, I'm happy to do a separate conversation or demo with you to show you this with my sales engineering team. But when we talk in-sprint testing, in one of our earlier releases this year, we actually we're allowing the user, the test specialist, to go ahead and build out test cases for the particular sprint without the UI being in place. And all that one has to do is essentially map the UI or the objects in that UI with the test case that they've built, as the UI comes live, to deliver on this in-sprint automation. It's also very important to know that, and I'm sure most of you know this, it's one part product, one part process, right? It requires a very, very, very mature process to deliver in-sprint automation. We're seeing many organizations trying to go after it, not really getting there. I'm being very transparent on this. And there are some that are doing N-1 and N-2, but even then, we're still seeing many organizations even struggle with N-1 or N-2 testing. So I think it requires a combination of product and mature process in order to get extremely successful results with this. And then on the second point, I'm not too sure about the details of this question. Again, happy to answer it, offline in a more detailed conversation. But when you talk about holistic regression, I'll touch on one point, and I'll use CNA as an example here. when they had to bring their regression within Avo very quickly, we used another one of our products called Avo Discover, which is a process documentation product. And it essentially allows you to very quickly capture all your workflows. And that data can then be ingested into Assure, and itself creates the test cases, greatly accelerating the speed at which you can get your existing regression suite up within Avo.
Thank you. And
if I just on that one point, in my experience, when we talk about in-sprint test automation, it's fairly easy. I wouldn't say easy, but the capability is there for teams. A lot of times when you talk about the microservices, right, API testing, et cetera, that's always been a much easier nut to crack, right, for in-sprint. When you get in, as soon as you start to introduce the front end, right, that's where things get a little bit more difficult. You're all many times forced into kind of that N-1 structure. And so I know we've had some discussions with Avo on this very point. And that's actually an area that we are, aggressively going to be pursuing as we go into next year. How do we, we've got most of our teams are in N-1 right now, but we still want to, again, that bar is continually getting raised. And so next year, we're going to be challenging our teams and leveraging the Avo to how do we get to in-sprint, especially for the front end testing.
We'll do it, Tom. We'll do it.
I know you will.
Great. Well, look, that seems like that future thought seems like a good place to wrap. I want to thank once again Tom for being so open and sharing so much detail of his journey at CNA. It's been really interesting. It's unusual, to be honest, for somebody to be so clear and specific, and I think that's really helpful for our audience to hear real detailed journey story. So thank you so much, Tom, for sharing with us.
Thank you, John.
And thank you, Peter, as well, for sharing your experience and for sharing your customer with us, of course, and for sponsoring today's event. I just want to let everybody know that you will be receiving shortly a copy of this, a copy of the case study write-up, which will have, in fact, I'm going to say, it'll have some detail that I don't think we covered. It won't have some detail that we did hear today from Tom, but you will be able to share the best of both worlds with colleagues who may not have made this webinar, because both of them will be available on the web, either via ourselves at QA Financial, qa-financial.com, or through Avo Automation and their website. And if you want to find out more about Avo Automation right now, when you drop off this webinar, you can stay within this portal and go to the stand that Avo has set up online and download materials. So thank you again, Vida. Thank you, Tom. It's been great to be with you today. And thank you, everybody for attending. Have a great day.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, thank you, Vida.